Hey guys, I'm Jessie, and today we are going to talk about some of my favorite completed fantasy duologies. I love a big series, but sometimes I want to just get through and have the plot be done and have a quick read, right? Duologies kind of do that for me. I have been really enjoying them lately as opposed to like bigger series, which I do love, as I've said. But sometimes a duology is just real nice. It's 2 books, you're good, you're done. So I wanted to talk about some of my favorite completed duologies. There are a ton more, a bunch that I absolutely am enjoying but have not read the second book, or the second book is not out yet. So keep that in mind. If there are others that you absolutely love, let me know because I am down to check them out. For the first one, I actually can't find my book 1. It is somewhere in this chaotic mess, so I grabbed book 2. And that is the Monsters of Verity series by V.E. Schwab. The second book is Our Dark Duet. The first book is This Savage Song. This is a YA fantasy duology that follows 2 characters from 2 different worlds. One is a monster, one is hunting monsters pretty much, but it is so good. I think the world is so wild in this, and there's no romance really, so I love to see that. There's a really cute budding friendship. And we have a main character who plays the violin, which I absolutely love. And yeah, this is just such a dark world, but there's still hope, and I absolutely love it. I love how the magic is so different from anything we've seen. It is, like acts of violence create monsters, and different types of violence create different types of monsters. So we've got, like the lower level that's probably like, a fist fight, things like that. Like, and going up from there. And most of the monsters don't look human, obviously, but we do have one very rare type of monster that does pass as human, and they are created from the worst of the worst, kind of like the mass violent acts. It's just such a really interesting and cool series. I actually have a full review, so I'm not going to get too much into it. I'll link that for you. I have a full review of the duology, so definitely check that out if you haven't read this. I feel like this is one of Schwab's like underappreciated works. Like, it's not talked about as much as some of her other books, but it is fantastic. Next up, we have an honorable mention, only because I have not finished the second book yet, but it is a completed duology, and I absolutely loved the first book, and that is The Great Cities. So the first book being The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. Honorable mention, I absolutely loved book 1. I have book 2. I still need to read it. I just wanted to mention it because it is, again, a really cool and unique kind of urban adult fantasy where we're following cities. And in this one, it is New York and the avatars of that city. And so like when a city is born, a avatar, a person from that city kind of becomes the embodiment of that city and has like kind of the city's magic. And something went wrong with New York, and instead of having one avatar, there's multiple that represent the multiple boroughs, and they kind of have to come together and fight the big bad, and the big bad is super interesting when you figure out who it is and what it is. So I'm excited to read the second book, but I wanted to mention it because it is completed, and I love Jemisin. Speaking of Jemisin, my other duology on this list is the Dreamblood duology, also by N.K. Jemisin. This one is interesting. It has some content warnings. Mainly in book 2, there is like sexual assault by a family member. It gets really dark in the second book, and some of the scenes are hard to read, but it is such a unique duology. Our magic in this book is pretty much like dream magic, which is really cool, but sometimes that dream magic goes awry and we have to figure out how to stop it. Again, we have kind of the ruling class and the lower class, and we have this like very important religious sect. It's really hard to explain. I would recommend just reading the synopsis because I have a hard time explaining this book and explaining the magic, but it was a really good time. even if it was, you know, pretty dark. So keep that in mind if you pick this up. Moving on to something probably a little lighter, we have A Cast in Firelight by Diana Swift. I don't own the physical copies of this, but I really enjoyed it. It was a just like fun YA fantasy duology. It is an Indian-inspired fantasy romance, and I had a good time. We're following, again, two characters, and there's actually a arranged marriage between them, and neither one of them really wants it, and they don't know each other. But they do end up having to kind of work together at some point, and while they hate each other, they actually end up loving each other. It's so good. And again, we've got like elemental magic, which is something that I really, really enjoy. There's like a mystery plot throughout. And I had a really good time with this series. Like, it was just a fun one. I have a review for book 1 if you want to check that out. But yeah, if you're just looking for like a fun, quick duology to kind of pick up, check out Cast in Firelight. I wasn't sure whether I should include this book on the list, but it is technically a completed duology unless she decides to add more, which I don't see why not. Because this book could be considered the duology, or it really can be read as a standalone. And that is the Alchemical Journeys series, which the first book is A Middle Game by Shonda McGuire. Seasonal Fears is the second one. So right now it is a duology and it is completed. I loved this book. This made it to my favorites of all time, my favorites of the year. It is such a weird adult fantasy sci-fi-esque story, and it's hard to explain, but I loved it. Seasonal Fears, the second book, I also really enjoyed. Maybe not as much as this one, but I did enjoy it. Even though we're following different characters, we do still get the characters from this book. So it's not like a full direct sequel, if that makes sense. In this book, we are following two twins, Roger and Dodger, and they are lab-created children, and they are given to two different families to raise apart from each other in the hopes that they will manifest into the personification of language and math. And throughout their life, they keep finding each other and then losing each other. And honestly, this book is wild. That is all you need to know. Just go into it kind of blind and knowing that it's weird and it's wild and it's confusing and kind of whimsical and so good. Another one of my favorite completed duologies is The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. This is a 1001 Nights retelling, and I had such a good time with it. This is one of the first books that I read when I started my BookTube channel, and I had the best time with it. In this book, we're following our main character, Shahrazad Shazi, and she actually volunteers to be a bride for the Caliph, who's kind of like their king. And that's just like not heard of because the Caliph takes a new bride and then kills her. Story sounds familiar? 1001 Nights retelling. She kind of takes this up because she wants to kill him and she wants revenge for her friend who was forced to be one of his brides, and she ended up dying. Of course, it doesn't end the way we think it will. She does, you know, just like in the story, we tell a story, keep him intrigued, he doesn't want to kill her. And as we go on in this duology, we find out why he's killing brides. And we kind of have this enemies to lovers romance. And honestly, it was really good and really fun. One of my favorite fantasy duologies, so I would recommend this one. So this is another one that I wasn't sure if I wanted to put on the list or not, but I did because of how much I loved the first book. And that is Where Dreams Descend by Janelle Angelis. I loved this first book. The second book was a little disappointing. It wasn't bad, but it was like a 3-star read, right? And I was looking forward to it being 5 stars like this one. This is such a cool YA fantasy though. It probably should have been a trilogy because the second book does kind of feel like a second book and it should feel like a last book, right? But nothing can overshadow how much I love the first book. So we're going to talk about it. And it's very Greatest Showman meets Phantom of the Opera, especially in the first one. We have a female magician who is kind of like kept in this house her whole life. She wants to leave. She wants to escape. She's not sure why she's really being held there. She wants to enter this competition. And she does end up escaping. And she enters this competition. And her mentor is kind of a magician who has kind of left the business, right? And he has to mentor her, and we have like a grumpy sunshine love story, and man, it's so good. I love it. It gives a lot of the Zac Efron Zendaya from Greatest Showman vibes with the main couple, so I loved the first book. The second book I did feel like lacked a little, and I wanted so much more, but it was still good. It was just disappointing for me. So kind of take that with a grain of salt if you decide to pick this one up, but know that the book one was so good. And the final duology on this list is Daughter of the Moon Goddess. This was a fantastic duology. I ended up absolutely loving it. The second book is Heart of the Sun Warrior, which I really regret not ordering the really pretty like Illumicrate. I don't remember if this was Illumicrate or Fairy Loot edition, but man, it's beautiful. In this, we follow the Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and they have been locked away on the moon for a very, very long time. And the reason that they are is because the Moon Goddess, when she was pregnant, she ended up taking the elixir of immortality from her husband, who had won it by doing like a brave act. And in order to prevent herself and her unborn child from dying, she did drink it, and she ascended, and she was actually punished for it because she stole it and locked away on the moon and forced to like light the lanterns every night. And she cannot leave. The daughter ends up being like, I'm going to win my mom's freedom. And she ends up leaving to try to win her mom's freedom. And we kind of go from there. She ends up starting out as like this maid in a like rich person's home when she first gets like down to the actual like world. And I love it. There is a love triangle, but I think again, this is very well done, and it's a love triangle that makes sense because it's not really what I would think of as a love triangle. It is more of a first love, puppy love, and then your second love, your grown-up romance, I guess, if you will, whereas you still have like the fond memories and love for your first love, like kind of thing. I thought it was really well done. The last book broke me, but I loved how it ended. It left me sad and broken and happy at the same time. So it's one of those bittersweet endings that I absolutely love. So I would recommend picking up this duology for sure. All right, and that is all of the completed fantasy duologies that I have to recommend to you guys today. Thank you for hanging out with me. And if you have any other recommendations, if you've read these and thought that you love them, or if you are deciding to pick them up, let me know so we can chat. My name is Jessie, and I will see you next time. Bye.